There is something that happens to certain people. They think of someone, and that person calls within the hour. They dream something in detail, and it happens 3 days later. They follow a pull that makes no logical sense, and it changes their life. Some call it God, some call it the universe. Some simply say, something responded. Science called it coincidence. Carl Jung called it something else entirely. And what he found, through decades of clinical work and his own terrifying inner experiences, was something neither science nor religion had fully described. There is a layer of reality beneath the one we normally inhabit, and the people who learn to speak to it find that it speaks back. Today we go into that. Jung's actual framework, what it requires, what it produces. Stay until the end, because the final lesson changes everything. 1. The universe Jung was talking about was not the one you think. Before anything else, we have to be precise about what Jung meant. Because the phrase, speaking to the universe, has been absorbed into a culture of wishful thinking, vision boards and manifestation, and the idea that if you want something badly enough, the cosmos will deliver it like an Amazon package. Jung would find this not just naive, but psychologically dangerous. The universe Jung spent his life studying was not a vending machine for human desire. It was something far more complex, far less comfortable, and far more demanding of the person who wanted to engage with it. Jung called it the unconscious. Specifically, the collective unconscious. Not the personal unconscious of repressed memories and private fears, though that was part of it. The collective unconscious, a deeper layer of the psyche that, Jung argued, is shared across all human beings, across all cultures, across all of recorded history. This layer contains what he called archetypes, universal patterns of energy, image, and meaning that appear across every human civilization independently. The hero, the shadow, the great mother, the wise old man, the trickster, the self. These archetypes appear in the myths of cultures that never had contact with each other. They appear in the dreams of people who have never encountered the stories that contain them. They appear, Jung observed with increasing conviction, in the fabric of outer events as well as inner experiences, in ways that cannot be explained by the ordinary mechanics of cause and effect. This was the universe Jung was interested in, not the physical cosmos, though he believed they were related. The deep psychic reality beneath individual consciousness, connecting all human beings to each other, and, he came to believe, to something beyond the human altogether. To speak to this universe is not to recite affirmations. It is to enter into genuine relationship with the deepest layers of your own psyche, and through that relationship, to find yourself in contact with something that extends beyond it. 2. Why most people cannot hear the response, even when it comes. Jung made an observation early in his career that shaped everything that followed. Most people, he noted, live almost entirely on the surface of themselves. They experience their conscious thoughts, their daily emotions, their rational plans, and their social performances, and they take this surface to be the totality of who they are. Beneath it, in the vast, dark, ungoverned territory of the unconscious, an entire other life is happening. Dreams they don't remember, impulses they rationalize away, fears that have no conscious source, attractions and repulsions that don't match any conscious explanation. The shadow, the parts of themselves they have denied, suppressed, and projected outward onto others. The anima or animus, the inner contralateral figure, the feminine in a man, the masculine in a woman, the bridge between consciousness and the deeper layers. The self, Jung's term for the organizing center of the total psyche, which encompasses both conscious and unconscious, and is always, silently, working toward wholeness. All of this is happening, all of the time, in everyone. And the universe, the deep reality Jung was describing, speaks primarily through this territory, through dreams, through synchronicities, through the irrational pull of certain images, people, decisions, through the eruption of emotion that seems disproportionate to its trigger, through physical symptoms that have no physical cause. But the person who lives entirely on the surface cannot hear any of this. They dismiss the dream as meaningless noise. They rationalize the pull away with logic. They suppress the disproportionate emotion because it is inconvenient. They treat the synchronicity as coincidence and move on. The first requirement for speaking to the universe, in Jung's framework, is not a technique or a ritual or a specific practice. It is the willingness to stop living entirely on the surface. To begin paying attention to the territory that most people spend their entire lives carefully ignoring. Because you cannot enter into dialogue with something you are refusing to hear. 3. The shadow, the conversation you have been avoiding. Here is where most people stop. Because Jung's framework makes a demand before it makes a promise. And the demand is this: before you can speak to the universe, you must speak honestly to yourself. Specifically, you must speak to your shadow. The shadow is everything you have decided you are not. Every quality you have rejected, suppressed, denied, or projected outward because it was incompatible with the self-image you have constructed. The anger you were taught was unacceptable, suppressed, now living in the shadow. The ambition you were taught was selfish, suppressed, shadow. The sexuality that was shamed, shadow. The grief that had no space to be expressed, shadow. The envy, the cruelty, the pettiness, the desire for things you believe you shouldn't want, all of it, shadow. Jung's clinical observation, accumulated over decades, was consistent and relentless on this point. The shadow does not disappear when you suppress it. It grows more powerful. It begins to operate autonomously, beneath your awareness, influencing your decisions and your relationships in ways you cannot see because you are facing the wrong direction. You see it instead in other people, projected outward onto whoever carries or seems to carry the qualities you have refused in yourself. The person who triggers you irrationally. The person you find repugnant without being able to fully explain why. The quality in others that makes you genuinely, disproportionately angry. Jung would tell you, gently at first, then with increasing directness, that what you most strongly reject in another person is almost always what you have most completely refused in yourself. And here is why this matters for speaking to the universe. The universe, the deep psychic reality Jung was describing, communicates through wholeness. It responds to what you actually are, not to the curated version of yourself you present to the world and to your own conscious mind. If you are in active denial of half of yourself, if your shadow is unexamined and therefore unintegrated, the signal you are sending into the depths is distorted. You are speaking from half of yourself and wondering why the response doesn't match what you asked for. Shadow work is not optional preparation for this conversation. It is the conversation. 4. Synchronicity. When the universe responds visibly. Now we arrive at Jung's most famous and most controversial contribution. The concept he spent the last decades of his life developing, in collaboration with the physicist Wolfgang Pauli, into a formal principle. Synchronicity. Jung defined it as meaningful coincidence, the simultaneous occurrence of events in the outer world and states in the inner world that are connected not by cause and effect, but by meaning. You think of someone and they appear. You ask a question in your mind, and the book that falls off the shelf opens to the answer. You dream of a bird, and the next morning find one dead on your doorstep. You are at a crossroads internally, and meet, apparently by chance, exactly the person who carries the information you need. Jung did not believe these were supernatural events. He believed they were expressions of the underlying connection between psyche and matter, an acausal connecting principle that links inner and outer reality in ways that the mechanical, cause and effect model of the universe cannot account for. What is crucial to understand about synchronicity, what most popular accounts leave out, is that it is not random. Jung's clinical observation was that synchronicities cluster around moments of psychological intensity, moments of major decision, of grief, of transformation, of genuine inner upheaval. They are most visible, most frequent, most unmistakable, at precisely the moments when the psyche is most deeply engaged with a question. This is not coincidence. This is the mechanism. When you are in genuine contact with your inner depths, when the question you are carrying is real, not superficial, when the work you are doing on yourself is honest rather than performed, the boundary between inner and outer becomes more permeable. And the universe, as Jung understood it, begins to speak through the outer world in ways that mirror the inner conversation. The synchronicity is the response. But it only comes, this is critical, when the inner conversation is genuine. 5. Dreams, the primary language of the depths. If synchronicity is the universe speaking through the outer world, dreams are its primary language from within. Jung spent more time on dreams than on almost any other subject. Not because he was interested in prediction or mysticism, but because he recognized in dreams the direct expression of the unconscious psyche, unfiltered by the censorship of conscious rational thought. Every night, in the state where the conscious mind relaxes its control, the deeper layers of the psyche speak. In images, in symbols, in narratives that follow a logic entirely different from waking rational thought, but a logic nonetheless. A precise, consistent, purposeful language that, once you learn to hear it, reveals things about your actual psychological situation that the conscious mind has been carefully avoiding. Jung's approach to dreams was not interpretive in the way most people imagine. He did not have a dictionary of symbols where snake means X and water means Y. He believed each dream had to be understood in the context of the specific dreamer's specific life situation, approached with curiosity and genuine openness rather than a predetermined system. But certain patterns he observed consistently. Dreams compensate for what the conscious mind is avoiding. The dream is almost always showing you the thing you are not seeing, the aspect of your situation, yourself, or your relationships that your waking consciousness has overlooked, minimized, or refused. Dreams carry guidance about major life decisions, not in the form of instructions. The unconscious rarely speaks in direct commands, but in the form of images and narratives that, when carefully examined, reveal the deeper truth about what you actually know about the situation. And dreams, when attended to regularly over time, show a developmental arc, not random nightly entertainment. A continuous, purposeful process of psychological development that Jung called individuation, the lifelong movement toward wholeness, toward becoming who you fully are. To speak to the universe in Jung's framework is, in part, to begin taking your dreams seriously. Not as messages from outside yourself, as messages from the deepest layers of yourself, which, at the level Jung was describing, may amount to the same thing. 6. Active imagination, the direct dialogue. Now we arrive at the practice Jung considered most essential, the one he himself used throughout his life, the one he described in The Red Book, the extraordinary, terrifying, visionary journal he kept during the years he called his confrontation with the unconscious. He called it active imagination. It is not meditation, exactly, not visualization in the modern sense. It is something more demanding and more strange. It is the practice of entering into direct, conscious dialogue with the figures and forces of the unconscious. Not passively observing them as in a daydream, not directing them as in visualization, but genuinely engaging with them as autonomous presences with their own perspectives, their own knowledge, their own agendas, and having a real conversation. The figure that appears in your dream, the dark stranger, the wise woman, the monstrous creature, the luminous child, Jung would say, return to that figure in waking imagination. Let it speak. Ask it what it wants. Listen to the answer without editing it, without rationalizing it away, without imposing your conscious preferences on what it says. This practice sounds simple. It is not. It requires a specific psychological condition that is rare and must be developed. The capacity to take the unconscious seriously, to treat its figures as genuinely autonomous, rather than as products of your own willful imagination, while maintaining enough conscious stability not to be overwhelmed or possessed by what emerges. This is the balance Jung called the transcendent function, the capacity to hold both the conscious and unconscious perspectives simultaneously, allowing them to enter into genuine dialogue, and waiting for the third thing that emerges from that dialogue. Not the conscious position, not the unconscious position, something new, something that was not available to either side alone. This is the moment Jung was pointing at when he spoke of speaking to the universe, not a metaphor. An actual direct engagement with the depth that underlies ordinary consciousness, conducted with full awareness, full presence, and genuine respect for what lives there. 7. What the universe requires before it speaks. Jung was not romantic about this. He was a doctor before he was a philosopher, and he brought a doctor's sobriety to every claim he made. And his clinical experience was consistent on one point that most people do not want to hear. The depth does not respond to performance. It does not respond to ritual without genuine inner engagement. It does not respond to technique without authentic psychological work. It does not respond to the person who wants results without the transformation that genuine contact with the unconscious produces. Because genuine contact with the unconscious, with the shadow, with the archetypes, with the self, changes you. It has to. You cannot encounter the parts of yourself you have spent your life suppressing without being changed by the encounter. You cannot genuinely integrate your shadow without losing the comfortable, simplified self-image you have been protecting. You cannot begin moving toward the wholeness Jung called the self without leaving behind the smaller, safer, more socially acceptable version of yourself you have been performing. This is the price, and it is a real price. The universe speaks, in Jung's framework, to the person who is willing to pay it, who is willing to be genuinely uncomfortable, genuinely changed, genuinely surprised by what they find when they look honestly into the depths. Not the person who wants the benefits of depth without the cost of descending into it. Not the person who uses spiritual language to avoid genuine self-confrontation. Not the person who wants the synchronicities without the shadow work that makes them visible. The universe, the deep psychic reality beneath ordinary consciousness, responds to authenticity, to genuine psychological engagement, to the person who is willing to become more fully themselves, even when what they find in that process is not what they expected or wanted.